As we're going through the Bible book by book and chapter by chapter, we're in Leviticus chapter 3. In Leviticus chapter 1, we saw the law for burnt offerings. In chapter 2, we saw the law for grain offerings. And in chapter 3, depending on your translation, you're either going to see the law for the fellowship or the law for the peace offerings. There may be some other words that are used, but those are the main two. And really, although there's a pretty significant difference there in the English, there's not much of a difference there regarding the meaning of these two words. This is an offering in the original language that was meant to show a mark of peace or a mark of agreement or a mark of friendship and alliance with God. And so this fellowship sacrifice or this peace offering shows that I'm in a relationship with God. It's a relational sacrifice. And that's pretty important for us spiritually as we think about how Christ's sacrifice has made it possible for us to be friends with God. It's Christ's sacrifice that makes it possible for us to be adopted as children of God. And so this idea of fellowship with God or being at peace with God is pretty significant when it comes to our spiritual lives. Well, as we look through this chapter, there's a couple particular things we need to pay attention to. You start off in verse 1. If someone's offering is a fellowship sacrifice and he is presenting an animal from the herd, whether male or female, he must present one without blemish before the Lord. He is to lay his hand on the head of his offering and slaughter it at the entrance to the tent of the meeting. And so what we're dealing with here is something that comes from the herd, so we're dealing with some kind of cow or animal similar to that, and you take it and you bring it. It has to be without blemish. Now this offering can be male or female. If you remember, the burnt offering could only be male, but this peace offering, this fellowship offering, can be male or female from the herd. And you take it without blemish to the tent of the meeting, to the entrance to the tent, and the priest there is going to kill it. They're going to slaughter the animal, and then they're going to take this blood, they'll collect the blood, and they're going to go to the altar, and they're going to sprinkle blood on all the four sides of the altar, and they're going to take the fat out of this animal, the entrails out of the animal, the fat that's on the entrails, the kidneys, and there's all kinds of stuff. They're going to take out the liver, and they're going to burn these things along with the burnt offering. And so this a lot of specifics about exactly what has to be done. Now, if you ask me why they have to take out these particular portions of the animal, I really don't have a good answer for you. I'm sure that there is some answer. There's some reason why this takes place, but I don't know what it is. And so if you happen to know, I would love it if you commented on this video or sent a message to us on Facebook and let us know what's going on with all these different things. What are the implications for? It may just be that these are details that God wanted to make sure that the people followed. But unless you follow these details, this offering, this fellowship sacrifice, this peace offering will not be pleasing to the Lord. It's only after all this is done that you can read in verse 5 where it becomes a pleasing aroma to the Lord. Now it says, if his fellowship offering is a sacrifice to the Lord, and it's from the flock. So now we have a lamb or a goat or an animal similar to that. It has to be male or female, again, without blemish. And you're going to do the same thing. You're going to lay your hand on the head of the offering. It's going to be slaughtered before the tent of the meeting. The blood is going to be taken, sprinkled on all the sides of the altar. And you're going to go through the same thing with the entrails. In verse 12, if this is a goat, he's to present it to the Lord. You lay your hand on its head. You're going to slaughter it at the tent of the beginning of the entrance to the tent of the meeting. Aaron's sons will take the blood and sprinkle it on all the sides of the altar. And you're going to go along with the same process again. One of the things we need to think about is how horribly bloody this process of fellowship, this process of showing our peace with God, how incredibly bloody this process is of these offerings, and how horrid this has to smell. You know, it talks about this being a pleasing aroma to the Lord. It's probably not pleasing because it really does smell good. It's a pleasing aroma because God sees our willingness to offer these things to show our fellowship and our peace with God, our alliance, our friendship with God, and that makes it pleasing to God. It's not necessarily the smell. You know, I don't even really know if God can smell because he doesn't have a physical body like we do. But the point here is that it's pleasing to the Lord. And when we offer our lives as sacrifices, that's what we want it to be. We want it to be something that is pleasing to the Lord. And we want our lives to be something that is in fellowship with God, that we're working with the Lord, that we have a friendship with God, an alliance with God. We're working for him, not against him. And so as we're looking through this chapter, chapter, looking for the spiritual aim of this. Again, there's this heavy emphasis on finding what God wants and doing what God wants. And in this particular sacrifice, I think the heavy emphasis is on working with the Lord, being a friend of God, being in alliance with God, doing God's things in God's ways so that God's will comes to pass. And as we're going through the Bible, book by book and chapter by chapter, this is Leviticus chapter 3.